All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling a
Yeah.
pretty interesting question. It's a kind of a what-if thought experiment.
Uh-huh.
What if Krishna, the historical figure, the
Yeah.
warrior, the strategist, the philosopher,
Yeah.
suddenly found himself in the 21st century,
Right.
face to face with artificial intelligence?
Mm.
I mean, it's kind of a mind-blowing concept, right?
Yeah.
This incredible clash of ancient wisdom
Yeah.
and modern technology, but
It's
it's also a question that, I bet a lot of our listeners have probably pondered themselves.
yeah, and I think it really speaks to that kind of, that innate curiosity we have
Right.
about how, these sort of timeless principles, these ways of thinking that have resonated for millennia,
Yeah.
how they might intersect with something as potentially transformative as AI.
Yeah, exactly. And to even start unpacking this, we need to, I think, start with a basic understanding of
Yeah.
Krishna's philosophy. And probably, one of the most famous verses from the Bhagavad Gita,
Right.
which states that your right is to action only, never to its foods.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we think about that in the context of AI,
Mm-hmm.
I think, one way that Krishna might initially approach this
Right.
is to see AI as a product
Mm-hmm.
of human action.
Right.
It's something that we've created.
Right.
It's a tool,
Yeah.
much like any other tool that humans had developed throughout history.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really it's a really potent starting point, right? Because if we focus on that verse, Karmanyavata kaste maphaloshu kadachana,
Right.
it's about the doing, the process of creation, rather than just being fixated on the outcome.
Right.
And AI, in its essence, is a result of human thought,
Yeah.
human ingenuity, hard work. I mean,
Mhm.
think about, the tools, the instruments that were available in Krishna's time, right? The chakra, the bow, the chariot.
Yeah, yeah.
These were all, designed for a purpose.
Right.
And I don't think Krishna's engagement with them was necessarily about rejecting those tools in and of themselves.
Right, exactly. And we see him, very much engaging with the technology, so to speak, of his time. I mean, if you look at his role in the Mahabharata, he's not just some kind of, distant observer.
Right.
He's deeply involved in strategy,
Yeah.
in warfare,
Mm-hmm.
in even the deployment of what were described as, these divine weapons.
Right. And I think it's really insightful to look at some specific instances of this, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the Sudarshan Chakra obviously is a really powerful example. It's
Yeah.
this incredibly potent weapon. But, beyond even that, think about his role in the peace negotiations.
Right.
Before the Kurukshetra war breaks out, he's deeply involved in trying to avert that conflict.
Yeah.
And then, when war becomes unavoidable, his strategic guidance,
Yeah.
the way that he, the tactics that lead to the fall of Jayadratha, or the way that that Bhishma ultimately meets his end,
Yeah.
all of these things, I think, demonstrate a very clear understanding and a willingness
Mm-hmm.
to utilize the most effective means available to him
Yeah.
to achieve what he believed was a righteous outcome.
Right.
He wasn't afraid of using, sophisticated means
Yeah.
when the cause was righteous.
Right. Exactly. And this kind of leads to a pretty crucial question when we think about AI,
Mm-hmm.
because,
Mm.
if this modern technology, so to speak, is being applied in a way that aligns with the principles of, righteousness or dharma,
Right.
and ultimately benefits human well-being,
Yeah.
would Krishna really oppose it? It seems like from his actions, it
Yeah.
would almost be a little bit contradictory.
Right. And I think this is where it gets us to start thinking a little bit more deeply
Yeah.
about the nature of AI itself, right? I mean, we now have
Yeah.
these systems that have these incredible capabilities.
Right.
They can analyze vast amounts of data. They can identify patterns that, might even escape human observation.
Yeah.
They can make very complex decisions.
Yeah.
But I think that the really critical question, if we're looking at this through Krishna's lens, would be, what's the intention behind it?
Right.
Is this power being guided by ethical considerations?
Yeah, exactly. And, Krishna's philosophy really emphasizes that power itself
Mm-hmm.
is not inherently good or evil.
Right.
It's the application.
Mm-hmm.
It's the motivation behind it that really matters.
You're right.
And you see this, throughout the Gita,
Yeah.
different characters wielding power for vastly different ends.
Yeah.
So, when we look at AI, we have to ask ourselves, is it being developed and used for purposes that are aligned with Dharma,
Yeah.
or are they not?
Right. And this is where I think the connection becomes really, really fascinating because you think about some of the potential positive applications of AI
Right.
that could really resonate with the idea of Dharma. You think about breakthroughs in medical research.
Yeah.
AI being used to develop new treatments to alleviate suffering.
Right.
You think about personalized learning platforms using AI to empower individuals with knowledge and education. You think about AI-driven solutions to address, social inequalities or environmental challenges.
Right.
It's not hard to imagine that Krishna might see these as, as modern day equivalents of those potent tools that were available in his time.
Right.
Instruments that can be wielded for the greater good.
But, of course, we can't ignore the flip side of that.
Right.
The potential for misuse is very, very real. I mean, we can imagine AI being used for things like, surveillance.
Right.
For autonomous weapon systems that could really kind of dehumanize warfare. For the spread of misinformation, manipulative propaganda.
Yeah.
And given Krishna's, very strong emphasis on justice and dharma, I think it's very likely he would have some pretty strong warnings against those kinds of applications.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think this kind of echoes another really powerful teaching from the Gita, where, it states, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya dushkritam.
Right.
Which essentially translates to, for the protection of the good, for the destruction of the wicked, I am born in every age.
Right.
And, while that verse is speaking to, I think, a much larger cosmic principle, the underlying idea, right, is this upholding of righteousness.
Right.
And this countering of unrighteousness.
Yeah, and I think when we think about that in the context of AI, it suggests that Krishna wouldn't necessarily just give a blanket endorsement or condemnation.
Right.
I think he would really evaluate its role based on this principle. Is AI ultimately contributing to the protection of the good?
Yeah.
Or is it contributing to the destruction of the wicked in its various applications?
Right.
I think that would be a fundamental question that he would ask.
Absolutely. And, it wouldn't be about the technology in isolation, but really about its moral implications and its impact on the world. And just as, he guided Arjuna on the battlefield, I think his guidance regarding AI would really center on those principles of Dharma.
Yeah.
Urging very careful consideration in its creation and its deployment.
So it seems like, if we try to answer our initial question, would Krishna embrace or reject AI? I think it's not as simple as a yes or no.
Right.
It seems like it would be more of a, he would probably try to understand it, guide it, maybe even try to regulate it, rather than just completely opposing it outright.
Right. And I think that's a really, really crucial insight, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just this binary accept or reject.
Right.
Krishna's approach, I think, was always so nuanced and really dependent on the context of the consequences. Right. So I think he would likely recognize that there's this immense potential in AI, right? Yeah. But at the same time, he'd also be acutely aware of the dangers of using it irresponsibly.
Right.
So, his primary concern, I think, would be to ensure that it's aligned with Dharma.
Right. To him, it wasn't the tool itself that was the problem.
Right.
It was the unrighteous intentions of the people wielding it. And AI is really just a tool, right?
Right.
Like a weapon can be used for defense.
Right.
Or it can be used for aggression.
Absolutely. And, that brings us back to, I think, some really fundamental aspects of Krishna's philosophy. The guiding principles that we've been exploring.
Right.
Through his teachings, the Vivek, Shraddha or Dharma, the discernment, the faith, the righteousness. And these aren't just abstract ideals, right? I think they provide a really practical framework for how we might approach and evaluate and interact with AI.
So it seems like, at the end of the day, Krishna wouldn't necessarily stand in the way of AI.
Yeah.
He wouldn't necessarily try to stop its progress. But he would, I think, advocate for its thoughtful development, its ethical application, and really, constantly come back to how important it is to align it with the principles of Dharma.
Right. And ultimately, I think the enduring lesson here is that
Yeah.
technology itself is not inherently unrighteous.
Right.
It's the intent behind its use
Yeah.
that determines whether it's used for good or for bad.
Exactly.
And, Krishna's wisdom, I think, really transcends the boundaries of time and technology. It offers us this timeless lens
Yeah.
through which we can approach even the most modern of dilemmas.
And that leads us, to a final, maybe even a slightly provocative thought for our listeners.
Yeah.
Based on everything that we've explored today,
Right.
do you think that artificial intelligence will ultimately prove to be a force for good in the world? Or do you think that it will ultimately be a source of, maybe even significant danger to humanity?
Yeah.
We're really genuinely interested
Yeah.
in hearing your perspectives on this intersection of ancient wisdom and artificial intelligence. So, feel free to share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Our next deep dive will delve into another thought-provoking question,
Yeah.
viewed through the lens of traditional wisdom.
Looking forward to it.
Until then.
Jai Shri Krishna.